If you are constantly asking yourself, is this it? Or am I doing the right thing? Today's show is for you. There's this existential anxiety I think we all experience at certain moments in life related to, what if I make the wrong move? What if I choose the wrong job? What if I am in the wrong job and I stay in it too long or leave too soon? Like, what if this better life feels like it's always out there, just one decision away, but you can't seem to find it? Or even worse, my friend, what if your very best life is actually happening right this very second and you don't even realize it, much less celebrate it or enjoy it? So, if this is making you feel a little bit seen right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. And today we are digging into something I think we all experience it at some point. This anxiety about whether or not we're doing the right thing and how that can rob us of joy, confidence, clarity, making us feel like something is off in our lives, like maybe it is. Maybe it isn't, but these are the questions that we're going to be tackling together today. Questions like, how do you know if your life is in alignment with who you really are? And if it's not, how do you change it without blowing everything up? So my guest today has built an entire methodology around this. She is a best-selling author, the former editor-in-chief of the Harvard Business Review, and a fierce advocate for realigning your life from the inside out. My guest, Suzy Welch, has a brand new book that you need to read called Becoming You. And today she's here to talk with us about it. Hi, Suzy.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your book and just like putting this amazing resource in the hands of people who are like, what am I doing with my life? Because you don't want to mess that up, right?
Oh, it's like the biggest question we ask ourselves. I mean, it's like that famous quote, which is there's sort of 2 days in our life, the day we were born and the day we figure out what we were born to do, what we
Oh,
do with our lives. And so that's what Becoming You is about, is getting people to the answer of that question sooner rather than later.
mhm.
Most of us eventually get there. But that yearning and that questioning can be in our hearts starting when we're
Yeah,
really young. I mean, isn't it
yeah.
sort of the question we ask little kids is like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And we never finish answering that question. And the genesis of the book is that when I uh, thought I had a methodology that I wanted to share, I
Mm.
ended up we can talk about it later if you want, ended up becoming a professor at NYU Stern School of Business.
I did want to talk about that.
And so I teach this methodology. That's where it actually started, was in the classroom, because I had this methodology, which I wish I had had as a business school student when I was at Harvard Business School in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And so I got on a conveyor belt and I went to a life that was kind of pre-prescribed. And then I got there and I started asking this question, is this all there is? Is this what I was actually born to do? Be a management consultant? I don't think so. And so over time, through a bunch of through research and through different life roles that I had, I was able to develop this methodology. And then I brought it to the classroom at Stern and began to see its efficacy, which was very humbling, because I thought, oh my, I think I might be onto something, and really gratifying because it really
Yeah.
changed people's lives. And it was a long after it was out there in the world doing that for a couple of years, that I was approached to write a book about it and start sharing it more widely. And it's been a fantastic ride.
Oh, I bet. And that's truly why I'm so excited to talk with you, because there is that work. And you have also written books on success,
Mm.
decision making, like short term decisions, long term decisions, and teaching this class for such a long time. So you have had a front row seat to how this works
Mm.
and what happens in people's lives when they're able to get very clear about who they are and what their mission in life is.
Right.
So first of all, I guess one of the things that I'm really curious to know is, I mean, you've just had a front row seat to so many people's process. Where do you see people beginning in this journey? Like, is it is it that they kind of spin their wheels and don't really know what to do? Or is it a wake up call when they start going down one track and they're wait a minute, this is like what happened to you? I mean, that sounds like your story. Is there kind of a moment where you want people to take this book, like intervention starts here?
I think you know it when you're not living your full purpose. I mean, you know it
Mm-hmm.
because you think there might be something else. And sometimes people go through the process and they say, "Well, actually, I am in the right place. I am living my purpose."
Yeah.
And so I think it's good for anybody at any point in their lives to either to do a checkup and say, "Am I living my purpose?" Because I do want to enjoy it and celebrate it if I am. And then for other people, I think there's a certain yearning, and you know you're not quite there yet. And I've gone through the process with people at every different stage of
Mm-hmm.
their lives. And sometimes people take the class and they think, I think it's just going to be fun because there's a whole big self-discovery element to it.
Yeah.
There's first we do the self-discovery. I mean, I am a very unwoo-woo person. Like I am becoming you is the antidote to people who are sick and tired of being told to live their purpose and want an
I
answer to
hear
the
you.
question. Answer to the question, well, how do I do that? And how do I figure
Yeah.
out my purpose? It doesn't just drop on your head. Okay. You have to figure it out. And so there's a big component of becoming you, which is self-discovery. And so sometimes
Mm.
people take the class either at NYU or in one of my workshops, which are widely open to the public. They'll take it and they'll say, I just took it because I think the self-discovery would be fun. Then they go through that and they're like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh no.
That's what I found out about myself. I may not be living my purpose, and there's some hard work to be done. But I think
Mm.
that, look, your question is when do you use this method? I think you use it
Yeah.
all the time. And I've had students who went through the process and they come back years later and they say, okay, time to use this process again. Let me get back into the vocabulary of it. Let me do some of the
Mm.
exercises again, and let me adjust and get back onto it. Because look, the way the world is going, and the way the economy is going, and the way companies are going,
Mhm.
you're going to have to adjust. I mean, nobody has a linear career anymore. Not that there ever were linear careers, although there were a few. But
Mm.
that's there's just constant reinvention, and we're all in that constant repotting the plant. And so,
Yeah.
how do you know if your plant has been unpotted, which way you go next? And
Right.
that involves stopping and painting a self portrait of yourself standing still, so that you know what direction to start running in when you start running again. You can't do one without the other.
That's amazing. I love that metaphor. Like you need like repotting the plant from time to time. And I love that because I do think um, there's this narrative, right? Like we figure something out, we have a trajectory,
Mm,
ideally one that we're passionate about. But like what you're saying is that even if you do have that figured out at one point in your life, or you think you do, then you evolve. Your life changes, the world changes,
the
and
work
like
changes.
you
The work,
have to
yeah.
do this
Yeah, the work changes. I
periodically.
mean, you have
Yeah.
to do it all the time. I mean, there's incredible research that shows now that job churn, which is the number
Yeah.
of aspects of your job that you need to change over the course of 18 months, is up to 65%, meaning that you're going to have to keep reskilling.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so it's
18 months.
yeah, so you'll have to turn over 65% of your skills. And so
Wow.
we are always changing. And I want to back up though, and I want to talk
Mhm.
about a word you mentioned, which just always makes me take a little intake of breath, and that's the word passion. And
Mm.
I'm not a big fan of that, doctor. In terms
Me
of
neither.
okay,
Let's dig in.
we are
I am.
aligned. All
All
right.
right.
Okay, so I hate to use the word hate, but I hate.
You can say
I'm
hate.
not.
Let's bring it.
But I hate it when young people are told to follow their
I know.
passion, because the next thing I say right afterwards is like, I always add afterwards, if you're good at it. I mean, it's like there's three elements. Becoming you is based on three elements. It says that your purpose is at the intersection of your values. Those are your deeply held beliefs, desires, and motivations, which, by the way, no one knows, but you will know if you read Becoming You. And then your aptitudes, which are your cognitive and emotional tendencies that make you good at some things and bad at others. You've got to know them. I'm sorry, you can't become, a pop star singer if you've got a bad voice. You have to know what you're good and bad at.
Yeah.
And both things. You need to know what you're good at, and you need to know what you're bad at. Okay. And
Mhm.
sometimes we follow careers because we've got a passion, but we're not good at it. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I just did a
Right.
podcast myself where I open up the kiln and I take out one of my pots, which is completely ugly and misshapen. But I love pottery, but I didn't become a potter. Okay. It's my hobby.
Totally.
Okay. And then there's our economically viable interests. That's the third part of it. We got to figure out what kind of work we want to do and should do because it will pay us, but also
Mhm.
interest us. Well, most of us I'm sorry to keep quoting research, but I am an academic.
Oh,
There's research.
please, as
Okay.
am I. We
Right.
are cut from the same cloth, Susie. I'm so happy right now. Okay, bring it.
Let's nerd out, shall we? Let's nerd out. But
Oh,
there's
yeah.
research that shows that most kids coming out of high school are aware of 5 to 7 jobs, 2 of them held by their parents, and the rest they can see with their own eyes, teacher, policeman,
Mhm.
so forth, right? You would think it would get a lot better in college. It doesn't. 11 jobs are what people are aware of coming out of college. 11. Do you know there's
Wow.
165 industries. There's hundreds of types of roles, and our aperture gets smaller and smaller, and we should be
Yeah.
pushing it more and more open. So part of the work of becoming you is to open your aperture also. But starting at the beginning of the journey, you got to know what your values are, and nobody knows what
Mhm.
those are. I mean, I did research that showed that 17% of people could tell you what a value was. Values
Mm.
have been hijacked by the political discourse. Family values, conservative values, about, and nobody
Mhm.
really knows what personal values are. It should be taught in high school, in my humble opinion. But you got to find
Mhm.
out what those are. We have ways of doing that, and you've got to find out what your aptitudes are. And the world will tell you what your aptitudes are over 40 or 50 years, but you could find them out
Mhm.
5 days with different methodologies. So
Assessments,
you've got
yeah.
to, right. So you've got to do that work, and maybe it will align with your passion. Maybe it will and maybe it won't. But at the end of the day, if you're doing what's at the intersection of your values, intersection again, okay, overlap of
Mhm.
values, your aptitudes,
The
and your
Venn diagram.
yes, it is
Right.
like the Venn
Yes.
diagram. If you're doing what's at the intersection, then that's your purpose. That's what you're meant
Mhm.
to do. Sort of like Joan of Arc with her sword that said, "I am not afraid. I was born to do this." And that is how you feel when you're living your purpose. You're not afraid because you know you were born
Mm.
to do it, and you feel exquisitely alive.
But I love that this though, because it comes through work and reflection and introspection, and it's not attached to this feeling.
Oh,
Because I think that that is part of the narrative right now, right? Is that I need to
yeah,
feel passion, right? And that I think that people oftentimes feel like something is wrong, that they should be experiencing a certain type of feeling, and
right,
that if they're not, like being in a relationship, a lot of times people worry that if they're not like feeling the way that they think they should feel, that
yeah.
this isn't a healthy relationship and they need to bail. And I love that you're really talking about a methodology that helps somebody get a lot of clarity into themselves, but also feel this, maybe not passion, but confidence. Like
Right.
I am in the right place. And
And
that's
sometimes
fantastic.
the
Yeah.
confidence leads to passion. Okay, once you start feeling really competent and really and confident in the role, sometimes that passion then grows. And a lot of times, there is an element of passion in it, but there is definitely generationally this sense like, I want this, and so I should be able to do it. And that's not always
Hmm.
the case. Okay. So it's a pretty becoming you is a deeply realistic methodology. It's
Yeah.
a place that is
Yeah.
absolutely you're able to operationalize. It's not about sort of like making you feel all fuzzy. You will feel good when you're done with it. People always do, but it's not about the warm fuzzies, because if that was the case, I would just tell you do what what's your
Whatever
fantasy?
you want.
What's your fantasy?
Yeah.
But that's not
Well, let's talk about that though, because I mean, that's also something that I really appreciate is that there's a realism that just because you aspire to have success in a particular career does not mean that that is possible for you because of your aptitudes and abilities, but also because of, as you say, the market. And so I think that what I'm hearing is that part of your methodology is also, in addition to uncovering your strengths and your values and your opportunities, like maybe closing some doors
yes,
too.
absolutely. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
tough love going on. It's a little tough love,
Hmm.
okay? And it's
Yeah.
in equal measure, okay? I mean, you've got to do the work, and I want people to be happy. I want them to be living their purpose, but there is work they should not be doing. And there
Right.
are not all of us can be calligraphers, okay? You have to understand that if calligraphy is your passion, that you're going to have to you're going to have to understand that if you have a high value of what we in the lexicon call affluence, in other words, you want to be rich, those things
Hmm.
don't go together. And you can't be mad at the system. You can't be mad that calligraphers don't make a ton of money. You got to understand there are trade-offs in this world, and your job
Mm.
is to find the trade-off that works for you. But it's work. It's not
Yeah.
osmosis. It might be over sort of the course of 40 or 50 years, but why not take some of the great wisdom that's available and the tools and investments that are available and expedite that whole process.
Yeah,
I wish it had
definitely.
happened for me. I wish it had gone.
Is it okay to talk about that a little? And I want to get more deeply into the how on the other side of the break here. But I mean, if it's okay, and you stop me if this is too much, but would you be willing to share, more about your personal journey
Of course.
and even just one moment of your own personal evolution where something shifted and it changed your trajectory? Could you
How
share?
long is this podcast? My whole life has been me having weird experiences that have shifted my journey.
I
I mean,
that's
I
what
am
was the
the
standout.
I'm the
Hmm.
beta tester of becoming you, and it's original, user.
Yeah.
Look, I was born in Portland, Oregon. I came from a
Hmm.
really artsy fartsy family. My parents were total hippies. No one talked about careers. We never talked about what we were going to be growing up. My parents were listened to Bob Dylan and danced around them. They were totally hippies. And this is the way
Hmm.
it was. It was in the 60s. And it was all beautiful. And then I, by a twist of fate, got sent away to boarding school. It's a long story, but I was a pretty bright young kid in school, and I ended up going to boarding school. And when I got to boarding school in New Hampshire, I was like, what the heck? There's a different way to think about the world. And I ended
Yeah.
up to be, surprisingly, very good at school. This was not something that was ever really discussed in my house. My parents were smart people and they valued education, but they never talked to me about where I was going to go to college. And in fact, the day I got into Harvard for college, I called my mom on the phone and said, Mom, I got into Harvard. And she said, Susie, you applied to Harvard? I mean, that's how hippy dippy we were. She didn't even know
Was
I
she
applied.
upset about that, or was she
No,
like, "Go, Susie"?
she
Okay.
was, she was, I don't know. That's a great question. She was neither here nor there. She was like,
Okay.
oh, okay, you applied? And I said, yeah, I did. And she said, how do you like that? Or something like that.
Mm.
And so then off I went. And I could tell you in 4 years, my parents never once asked me what I was majoring in. They never asked me how school was going. They had their own lives. They had 4 children and they were as an Italian, they were very interested in my brother. And that was very
Mm.
natural in our household. And I think that I just bounced along. But what ended up happening was I was naturally a good writer. I ended up at the daily newspaper at Harvard. And one day
Mm.
in my senior year, 2 guys in suits walked into the newsroom and they said, who would like to work in Miami? And I had no job. So I said, I'll work in Miami. So off I went to the Miami Herald. It was that planned. It was that
Wow.
deliberate. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, literally 2 guys came into the newsroom and I went to Miami. And so I went there. It was a great time to be a journalist. But I will definitely tell you that almost immediately there was something wrong with being a journalist to me. There was something
Mm.
conflicting. I didn't know the language at the time, but there was something conflicting with my values. I didn't
Mm.
like how mean journalists were sometimes. I didn't like they were solo operators, that they were very competitive with each other. I mean, I had no language around this, but there were definite aspects of journalism that were contrary to my values of belonging, which is community. I just felt very mercenary and mean being a journalist, and I was just not.
Mm.
That wasn't a match. But
Interesting.
I continued along because what else was a girl to do? And then I did another extremely deliberate, mature, poised, thoughtful thing, which is I followed a boy. Okay. I followed a boy up north,
As we do, yes.
as we do. And my parents kind of shrugged and said, well, you always liked him. And I was like, yeah, I like him. I married him. And he's still a dear friend. The marriage did not last. He's the father of my 4 kids. And he went on to have a great life. And I'm very, very fond of him. That's how I got up there. And then, look, fate is funny. A boss came to me one day. I was a reporter in Boston, and he said, "We need somebody to cover business." And I was like, "I don't know anything about business." He said, "Sure you do." And I said, "I really don't." He said, "What's debt?" And I said, "That's when you owe people money." He said, "What's equity?" And I said to him, "I'll have to get back to you on that." Okay. I said, just
Yeah.
suffice it to say, I'm now a business school professor, right? So obviously I picked it up, but I went to business school because I didn't know anything about business. And there I discovered, that was one of those moments that you asked about. I went to Harvard Business School and I thought, I love this stuff. I love
Mm.
it. I'm meant to be in business. I'm a person who wants to build things. I want to belong to organizations. I'm an organizational girl. I want to make money. I had never had much money. I like the idea of
Mhm.
having money. I never thought it was available to me as a journalist. And I went into business. I graduated top of my class. I went into business and I thought, oh, something is still not right. Something's still not right. Well, then I had 4 kids and I was never a maternal mom. And I knew that I was always going to work. And I really had sort of a dead tie between my career and my kids.
Mm.
And it was very, very hard to be consultant with 4 young children. And at a certain
Yeah.
point, I became a single mom. And so I went back to business journalism, which was a perfect blend of what I had done. And at that point, I was divorced and things were going along. I became the editor of the Harvard Business Review, as you mentioned.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I went to go interview a man named Jack Welch, who was who was the CEO of GE, and we fell in love, and we blew up our worlds, and we got married.
Mm.
And that led to 20 years of working with Jack as we wrote several best-selling books together. We had a TV
Hmm.
show together. We traveled the world together. We raised my
Wow.
children together. And it was great. I mean, I think that I was kind of operating at 50 to 60% professional capacity because
Hmm.
I was taking care of my family. I had
Yeah.
teenagers and I had a husband who was highly demanding, to put it mildly. And I was all going along quite nicely. I was on the Today Show at that point as a regular correspondent covering business and careers. And I was writing for the Oprah magazine as their career
Mm.
columnist. And that was great. It was kind of a great gig. Um,
Yeah.
and then my husband got sick. And that's what happens in life is that it just throws you curveballs. There's no, cancer has no conscience, as we all know, and
Mm.
it comes for us all. It comes for people good and bad. It comes for people young and old, and it came for him. And we fought very, very, very hard. Nobody's ever fought harder than my husband, and we fought and fought until we couldn't anymore.
Right.
And we were lucky to know when we had a year left because we were really able to have a very beautiful goodbye. Of all the children came home. All the children were grown and married at that point,
Mm.
and they were able to come home and live with Jack and me until the end. And we were all with him, and I did a lot of pre-grieving as people do in these
Yeah.
kind of hospice situations, but nothing
Sure.
prepared me for what it was like when he did finally go to heaven.
Mm.
And I was sort of had the trap door underneath me open, and I had no idea what to do with my life anymore. And it just so happened that it all happened at the beginning of COVID. He did not die of COVID, but it was at the beginning of COVID. So I
Wow.
had this kind of double whammy of losing my husband and the world closing down in the same month. And I didn't know what I could possibly be or do. I was really lost. I mean, it gave me such a heart for people who are lost because I
Right.
experienced the gut wrenching, soul draining, uh, vertigo
Right.
of just being lost. Like, what's next for me? In a way, I was very fortunate because I didn't have to work. Jack was generous, in his love for me. And so in a way, it was scary because I had so many options, right? I could
Right.
travel the world. I could write another book. And then I felt very called though to this methodology that I had slowly but surely been developing over the past 10 to
Hmm.
15 years as a careers, expert. And I found my way to NYU when I was coming out of the woods, literally and physically coming out of the woods sort of a year after the pandemic started and a year after
Hmm.
I died. And I went to the dean of business at NYU, who I knew. And I said to him, I have an idea for a class. It's called Becoming You. It's this methodology. And he said, let's give it a try. Let's try it as an experiment. And, if you put a class called Becoming You into a course catalog for a bunch of 20s and 30 somethings, it doesn't last as an experiment for very long. And it was extremely out of the gate, highly populated class.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a need. And it was a need for people coming out of the pandemic because the pandemic raised a lot of questions it did not answer. And everybody was like,
Totally.
wait, who am I? What do I do? What's going on here? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Becoming you. Yeah, I want to figure out how to become me. And before you knew it, the class was very popular. And
Yeah.
I continually then began to really dig in and with what became the Becoming You Labs, which a bunch of researchers and other folks began to really start building out the methodology with different assessments. I invented 4 assessments, and different tests and tools, and really built it into the methodology that it is today. So
Mm.
that's a long answer to your question, but I mean, along the way,
Yes.
the number of times I was like, "Wait, I got to turn left or right," was too many to count. And I think that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. You gotta, I always like to say this, you gotta pick it and stick it. So in a certain point in your life, you gotta pick things and stick with them. I mean, I was the editor of HBR for a long time. I wrote
Mhm.
for for a long time. I mean, I was not bouncing from thing to thing. I'm 65 years old, and so I plan to be a professor for the rest of my days, and I'm entering into my fifth year of it, and I plan to keep doing it for until they force me out. But I would say that, you know, you got to pick it and stick it. But when the moment comes and that thing's not there anymore, you gotta pick yourself up
Yeah.
and try again.
Wow. Yeah, you can't stay here. God, Suzy, thank you so much for sharing your story. And there are just so many elements that I think we can all relate to, having experiences in life where it's just like divine intercession. The universe just puts something in front of you and you're like, yeah, I'm going to get on that boat. And there you go. But then like moments where you pivot. But I think, what you described, with the loss of your husband, and I am so sorry for your loss. But it's like the lighthouse just went dark, that there had been this purpose, this tractor beam that you were in. There was a groove, and then it was just like cut off in some ways, and that
It's
floating
funny.
in space.
It's funny you should say that, because on Jack's actual tombstone there is a lighthouse. Because we live.
I just got chills.
I know, it's funny. You should say that. We live in. We shared a home on Nantucket, the island off Massachusetts. Some people know Nantucket, others are not familiar with it. And and our house was right near the Sankaty Head. It's a very, very old lighthouse, and the light used to sweep through our house. It was beautiful. And when he died, my daughter, our youngest daughter, said to me, why don't we put the lighthouse on Jack's gravestone? And it says on it, his light will shine forever. And it's true. It's still, but boy, do I miss that light some days. I do.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, interesting that the universe wanted us to talk about that lighthouse, and that he was that for you and your family and many other people, but that when that light goes out, there's this period of confusion and unknowing, and that's when that introspection starts. And I'm hearing that through your own process and the process that you're now teaching to so many other people, it helped you redefine a purpose, that light from within you that you could have confidence in again. And
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I
this is
think
where I'm going.
the funny kind of iron or beauty in a way is it that I became me through becoming you. And then I can't tell you the number of times people oddly say to me things like, you're such a light to me, or you shone a light on my future. And I'm like, I was the light. And so I wonder, that something's going on with this metaphor continuing through my life. And I am happy I'm overjoyed. Happy is not a strong enough word. When becoming you does become the lighthouse for people.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's dig into that. So now we're going to get into the good stuff. Suzy is going to explain more about the 3-part framework from the book Becoming You and the NYU class that she has been teaching to so many people through the years, so that she can share some of the wisdom with you in a way that makes this actionable. And of course, to get all of the details and take advantage of all the resources that Suzy has developed to support you in this, you're going to want to read the book, because there's a lot here. But Suzy, hopefully you can give us at least a high-level understanding of how this works, and hopefully even some actionable things that people can do as they embark on this process.
Yes. Yeah. All right. I'd love to do that. Listen, the book has all of the exercises and assessments in it. Or you can go to my website, SuzyWelch.com, and get all those. And we also have a workbook if you want to follow along and do the.
Oh, that's so good.
Some people love a workbook. I actually like a workbook. So anyway,
it's so helpful.
Yeah, it really is. And then you have all your thoughts in the same place. I mean, some people tell me that they still look back and refer to their Becoming You workbooks, and that they still see how they did on the different exercises. All right. Let's dig in.
Okay.
Once again, the framework is based on finding the intersection of your values, your aptitudes, and what we call your EVIs, your economically viable interests. So let's start with values. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, very few people actually know what values are, and they don't really know what their own values are, because this word is not does not have a generally accepted definition, except among academics, and it doesn't.
And psychologists, excuse me,
and others who are in this business. And And there's a lot of generic, non-specific, very vague words around, but we'll talk about that. And then
Yeah.
aptitudes. So the process begins with an excavation of your values. First, we
Hmm.
define values. These are the deeply held beliefs, motivations, and desires that drive our actions and decisions. So here's where it gets sort of complicated. Number one, we have values. We have things we really want and believe in, and we'll talk about them. There's 15 human values. Everybody has some level of each one of these 15 values, but some have high and some have low. Okay, and they're all on a continuum. But here's where it gets kind of tricky: is we may have a value, but we may not be living it. Okay, so
Oh, all the time I see
all the
that.
time. So we have values, and then we have a level they're being expressed. Okay. And so, as
Right.
I said, there's 15 values that cover all the human wants, needs, and desires. Now, I could really nerd out because this is what my PhD thesis is about. But over the past 100 years, where there's been a lot of thinking about human values, um,
Mhm.
uh, there have been different values inventories created. There's the famous Schwartz values inventory, which you're probably familiar with, which was created at the University of Jerusalem in 1990, which has 19 values. And then there's the Strang-Alport values inventory that was developed many, many years ago, almost 60 years ago, that was created at Harvard, which has 11 values. Well, I was not happy with any of these, even though they're brilliant and I respect the academics that created them. But based on my empirical research, there were two problems with all the values inventories that existed. Number one, they were not modern. For instance, there's no value for self-care, and there's
Mm.
no value for flexibility in either of them. And they didn't capture the fact that I mentioned to you earlier, which is that you could have a value but not be expressing it. You could not be expressing it because you have kids, or because
Right.
you've got a job that doesn't let you express it, or whatever. And I wanted to create an inventory that both allowed you to sort of talk about what your true values were and what your actual expression was of them. So I created it. It's called the
Mhm.
Values Bridge, and all my students take it, and you can take it online. Again, you go to SuzyWelch.com, and there's a free version of it, and you can find out what your values are absolutely free. You could also get the souped up version of it, which tells you which of your values are in conflict. And that's an important concept, okay?
That
Because
is so important.
that's right. So, uh, one of the frustrating things as an academic was for me, and really digging deep in this field, was that academics talk about values, but then they have this kind of crazy theoretical notion that if you have one value, you can't possibly have the value that's in conflict with it. But in fact, you and I know that in real life, that's the way it goes. So,
Yeah.
for instance, I said earlier that I was not a very maternal mother. My kids and my career were in a dead heat. Okay, and I
Mhm.
held in those many years my kids were growing up something we call family centrism, which is the value of having family as the organizing principle of your life, in
Mhm.
equal measure with a value that's called achievement, which is the desire
Yeah.
for seen success, the desire to have conventional success. That people look at me and say, "Look, she's achieved a lot." I held those in equal measure. They're directly in conflict because
Yeah.
work wants you
They are.
100%
They
24
can be.
7, and yet they
Yeah.
are. And you can balance it every single day, but they're in conflict. You can sort of fight that war every day. That's what I did for 20 years. Eventually, your kids grow up and go away, thanks be to God, and then they bring the children with their problems. But I like being a grandmother very much. What the Becoming You process does is it says, okay, enough of the fluffiness around what you think your values are. If somebody was to ask you what your values are, general person, you would say family, financial security, and happiness. And those are just,
Right.
pardon my French, they're just BS values, because all values, again, there's 15, they're very nitty gritty. They drive all your actions and behaviors, and you exist somewhere on a continuum of them. Let's just take one called scope. Okay. Scope is one of the values in the Becoming You lexicon, and it's about how big or small a life you want. Okay. Do
Hmm.
you want a big,
Interesting.
exciting life that's filled with new experiences, risk, learning, new people? You want to swallow the world, you want to travel all the time. And then at the other end of that continuum is low scope. Neither is better or worse. But if you go on TikTok, there's a whole vertical for low scope. I like this little life. Okay. And then they have a
Mhm.
picture of somebody with like their twee daughter walking in the woods. Okay. And it's a choice how big a life you want. People have
Mm.
fights, couples have fights all the time. One
Yeah,
wants a
oh,
high
yeah.
scope, but what they fight about is each other. And they never say, look, we have a value. The value is called scope. I've got high scope, you've got low scope. Can we
That
meet in
is
the
so
middle?
interesting. No,
Yeah.
I love this because like as you're talking about this, like my brain is turning because
Mm,
you're absolutely right. I think that so many people have values that are unknown to
yes,
them
that's
and they
right.
think they value one thing, but that is not what is they're actually doing.
That's
But
right.
that there's also the concept of scope is interesting because like as you were speaking, I was also thinking about like the personality dimensions that can impact this as well, but to come into clarity around like no, this is actually who I am, this is important to me, and be able to own that. But also in a relationship, so I'm dually licensed, I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a marriage and family therapist. We do a
Yes.
lot of couples counseling, we talk about it a lot on the show, but there's so much magic that happens when you can understand yourself, but also truly not just understand, but respect your partner for their
Yes. You
differences
can
and the
talk
things that
about
are
it.
important to them. That's right. And so that this gives you visibility into those differences in a
So,
way that, yeah.
so listen
Mm-hmm.
to this, marital counselor person, Dr. Robbie, is that if two people take the values bridge test and they check a box that says I permit it,
Mm.
their values come up right next to each other, and
Oh,
the
good.
levels are compared.
Susie.
And I know I accidentally developed a dating app. I didn't mean to, but I think that it's
I'm
like,
getting really excited right now.
I honestly, every time I discuss this with somebody who's in the marital space,
Yeah, yeah.
in the counseling space, they're like, how can we get our hands on this? Because it will take, like, literally, if you had put my values bridge next to my husband Jack's values bridge, we would have had zero conflict. We were exactly aligned on every value. That's why we had such a happy marriage. But if you'd done it with my first husband,
Mm-hmm.
we would have had 15 conflicts. I wanted
Mm.
high scope, he wanted low scope. I wanted high luminance, he wanted low luminance. He wanted this, I wanted that. We were different on every single one. So there's 15. So I love the value scope because it's the first time, oftentimes when
Right.
I'm talking to people about the values, that they say, oh my God, there could be a language which would
Yeah,
allow
yeah.
people to talk about their differences without saying you, and say like,
Oh, for
so
sure.
think about this. There's a value called work centrism. Work centrism is how much work is an organizing principle of your life. It's actually quite different from achievement, or not quite different. They're aligned, but it's different than achievement. It's how much
Mhm.
I love work so much. I find work interesting and fun. It's the organizing principle of my life. The other day, I caught a lift from a friend who was a home ec teacher at a rural elementary school in Maine. She worked every day of her life, and then they retired her because in Maine there's a required retirement age.
Mhm.
And she sat at home behind her beautiful house in Maine, looking out at the lake for about 15 minutes. And she turned to her husband and she said, "I'm going down to the supermarket and I'm getting a job as an aisle runner." And she got a job, like literally, people send in their orders for groceries, and she runs up and down the aisles and she fills the carts that they then deliver home to people. And she has to work. She loves work. She has
Mhm.
high work centrism. I have students, I meet people all the time, and like work is what they do so that they can go have fun. Okay. And they have lower work centrism. So here's what happens when a low work centrism person is married to a high work centrism person, they call them a workaholic. Okay.
They judge.
Okay. They give it a disease name, a holic
Right.
disease name. They say, you're a workaholic.
Mhm.
The other person sitting there saying, you're just lazy. That's what they're saying. But in
Mm.
fact, what's really going on is there's a value called work centrism. And we don't have to call each other's names. One person has a high value of it and the other person has a low value of it. And you can talk about that as a value and work out your differences that way without accusing people of being good or bad. You should be valued.
Absolutely.
Agnostic. So the big value that sets everybody's heads on fire is a value that I named. I named it this because I didn't want to be judgy. The value of eudaimonia. That's the Greek word for flourishing. Okay.
Okay.
And it's the value.
Eudemonia.
Okay. It's the value of self-care, pleasure, recreation. It includes sex. It's anything that feels good to you. All right. And I don't know about you. I'm 65. When I was in business school, if you'd given the values bridge to all of my fellow students, eudaimonia would have come in at number 15. Joy and pleasure were postponed until you had achievement. They were postponed until you had affluence, all the other
Mhm.
values. Okay.
Mhm.
75% of my Gen Z students have eudaimonia as their number one value.
Amazing.
Joy is not to be postponed. When you know that so a lot of times there's fights between the generations. And look, I say to them, let's stop fighting. Gen Z has eudaimonia as a top value. Either you buy in or you find the 20, if you don't want to hire them, then find the 25% who don't have eudaimonia as their top value, but stop picking on them for their values. You have a right to your
Right.
values. They have a right to theirs. So the values work of becoming you is quite straightforward. You take the test, you find out your values, you find out what their rank order are. The top 5 are your core values. The middle 5 are your moderate values. And then you have your peripheral values. And and then you actually get a number that tells you what the variance is between how much you have it and how much you're living it.
Oh, man.
I know it.
This is
I have sat there
fantastic.
with couples where one member of the couple has 0 variance. They're living their life they want. And the other member of the couple has 98% variance.
Oh, man. Well, we
That's
know
a
the name for that. Yeah.
So we
Okay.
call those people incongruent. So I'd say that you find out, okay, I'm happy, but look at this huge variance on the value of agency. Agency is the value of self-determination. How much you want to drive the bus of your life. Some people, they don't feel as if they're themselves unless they are driving every decision and outcome. I happen to be a very low agency person. I'm highly collaborative. I don't care who's driving the bus. I get into the car and I don't care who's driving literally. Okay. But other people my husband was extremely high agency. That's why we got along so well.
Yes.
I always said, no problem, honey. And so very, very hard though, when 2 high agency people are in relationship. When they're in relationship,
Definitely.
it'll work. Okay. If you've got a team and everybody's high agency, there's a problem.
There's a
So,
problem.
what ends up happening is we find out using this tool, everybody's values ranked 1 through 15. We find out your variance on each value. We find out where your conflicts are and where your harmonies are. Some values are very aligned. Work centrism, achievement, affluence, very aligned. Okay. So anyway, but you've got to find this out if you want to find out your purpose. So that's the first step. There's other exercises. There's 6 other exercises that are not the tool, not the values bridge tool, but it's the queen of all the exercises. I'm not going to lie. All right.
Yeah, no, but because you need to have that clarity before you can even think about starting to answer any other questions without that core information. Like, what is your decision even based on? I love it.
Can you make any decision around your
Right.
purpose or your career without knowing your values? And yet people do it their whole lives long. Then
They get in a car and drive to Florida.
That's right. That's right. And then you wonder what's not exactly right here.
Yeah.
And you end up finding out about your values, but it could take you a decade.
Right.
So after that, we move on to aptitudes in the methodology. And I use 4 big tests to assess aptitudes. I think that, you've got 2 different kinds of aptitudes. You have intellectual aptitudes, and we test for the 8 big ones, which are just sort of patterns of how you think. Are you a future focuser or a present focuser? Are you a brainstormer or an idea processor? I mean, there's just all different ways your brain works. And one of the ones I love to use is sort of, are you a generalist or are you a specialist? Our brains are wired different ways. And woe to the person who goes into a career that really calls for people to be specialists, but they are a generalist. A generalist is like the mayor of the town, a little bit about everything. And a specialist is like Sherlock Holmes, you dig deep, 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 deep. So I think that you need to know how your brain is wired, but, and this is a huge but, included in aptitudes is stuff about your personality. Why?
Oh, yes.
Because
and cognitive processing style. I mean,
that's all part of it. But your personality is really important because you can succeed in a job or fail in a job because of your personality. And so we do a lot of personality testing. We use the Enneagram, which I adore.
Oh my goodness. I just had the opportunity to speak with Ian Cron on this podcast this past week, and I am such a super fan.
Yeah.
And for any interested people, and this may be part of your program, Ian has just developed an upgraded version of the Enneagram on typology.com. I just want to give it a plug because I'm a big fan of that assessment, and there is more legitimacy around it, I think, than some people understand. It's based on real psychology. Yeah. And so it has a reputation in some circles, but anyway, so sorry, just when you said that, I got very excited. So we're going into,
we are having at NYU the first academic conference on the Enneagram in several decades in the fall. Yes. And we work with Rob Das, who's also a world's leading expert on Enneagram. I happen to like the Reti of Enneagram, but I will definitely check out the one you just mentioned.
Check it out. You know what? Like aside here, I was operating my entire life thinking that I had achievement orientation, which I certainly do. But I took this a different version of the assessment that honestly was based on better psychometrics. I'm an Enneagram 7.
Really?
I know. Yeah. And because there are always some things about the achievement, like way of being that didn't fully fit. Anyway, I don't want to derail the
No, no,
conversation,
I
but,
know.
but I think
Yeah.
it's
It's
important
very
to realize though, because without fully understanding your like core personality and motivations, that can also lead
absolutely.
to,
We
yeah.
spend a long time on the Enneagram because people mistype themselves constantly. And I think with the Enneagram, I don't actually talk about it in my book because I
Hmm.
don't think
Hmm.
people, unless you're going to be working with somebody to properly type yourself. I mean, I was originally
Right.
typed as a challenger. I am so not a challenger. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
I could
so
see that.
anyway, it's a tool, but we use that, but we
Yeah.
use other tools. I developed 2 tools for the aptitude section also, which
Hmm.
are still in beta, but we look forward to getting them out there to the world. And so after you find out your aptitudes, really figuring out what you can do and can't do, actually, technically, what you can and can't do. Are
Hmm.
you a specialist? Are you a generalist? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Are you a person who has a lot of ideas or a person who processes ideas for other people? This you need to know about yourself because don't
Hmm.
go be a consultant if you don't like doing research. Do you know what I'm saying? There are actual
Right.
aptitudes involved with each job. And then
Yeah.
the third part of the whole methodology, again, all of this described ad infinitum in the book, is finding out what kinds of work you are call you intellectually and emotionally, and that's a matter of opening your aperture. What industries are out there? And people usually, as I said earlier, just know about 1 or 2 industries. I think, oh, tech is where you've got to go today. It isn't where you have to go today. It's only where you have to go if tech calls you. And there's lots of other industries, and there's lots of types of jobs. A lot of people don't know what HR does. They don't know what some of the trades do. They don't know all the different types of jobs, and so you have to do a bigger survey of what's out there because we just cut ourselves short in
Mm.
the gigantic world of work that exists. And then after we gather all that data, and it is a lot of data to gather, I'm not going to lie, this is not a hack. This is a
Hmm.
process, okay? And then you look at the intersection, and usually the different purposes that you could pursue show up quite naturally in the process. If not, we've got the workbook that actually kind of uh,
Yeah.
pushes you there much more directly. But usually
Hmm.
it's not necessary. And that's it.
Wow.
And when I say that's it,
That's it.
that's an exhaustive process, but I've seen it work so many times. I've just seen it
Right.
change people's lives so many times. It's very gratifying. But it's not like it's not like you're sitting there jotting on a piece of paper and, oh, there's my purpose. I mean, if purpose was easy to come by, there wouldn't be so many people who were feeling lost
Yeah.
right now in
Oh,
their
I
lives.
hear you. I hear you. Well, my goodness. I mean, if you're going to devote a period of time to doing something important, it is hard to think about like what could be more important than it was truly. I mean, like,
No, you're
who am I
preaching to
that
the
with
choir.
a values piece? Like, truly, I mean, this is incredibly important. Okay. I do actually have two curiosity questions
Yeah.
for you though. Um, One of the things that I have experienced with clients, I'm also like a clinical supervisor of other therapists. And I have to tell you that I think that it can be difficult sometimes for people to get visibility into what an actual career path is going to be like, right? So they imagine values alignment, say with counseling,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm,
So because before you start to do the
mhm.
profession, it can really be difficult to know what it is that you're really getting into. And so, like, I have worked with early career counselors who have gone through graduate school, sometimes accumulated quite a bit of student loan debt, get into this for a year or two, and I think I've made a mistake.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, but now there can also be, I have made a mistake with the profession itself, or I am in the wrong environment because, as you know, different organizations have different cultures, different vibes. And so you might be doing the same thing in one company versus another, but the values alignment at the second company could be different. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious if just in your experience or in your process, if you have any ways of helping people get even a little bit more information before they get too far down a road,
Mhm.
because there's that like experiential piece. Like,
Right.
is
And
there
the
any way to circumvent that, or do you just have to do it?
There are. It's such a great point that you raised. And I would add this extra layer to it, which is sometimes
Hmm.
people attracted to careers because of identity issues. Like,
Yes.
I mean, like, I feel like I should be a counselor. I feel like I should be a doctor. And there's some real identity stuff. And one of the things I like about the Becoming You process is it tries to strip out that identity stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It tries to strip out that expectations stuff of what we think people should be saying about us. I think that this is actually, I'm going to put in a pitch for AI. I think this is where AI comes in very handy. I think you can type into AI, literally good chat GPT. Can you please tell me about the worst day in the life of a counselor?
Oh,
Yeah.
I never even thought about that. What a good idea.
Tell me about the worst week in the life of a journalist, or like, what are the downsides? I mean, scan your big brain out there and like, what are the negative things? I was talking to my daughter about changing careers, and she found a video on YouTube that said, here's all the reasons you shouldn't become this job. And I think you got to do your research, but not search for the stuff that's telling you what's good about it. Search for the stuff that says, like, describe it on its very worst day.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, though, also you make a really subtle and important point to say, a job may be very aligned with your values and aptitudes, but it's the culture of the place that you're working that's off. And I think, that is, you got to be able to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. You've got to be able to say, okay, I know my values, I know my aptitudes, I know my interests. What is not aligned here? And then if you know that data about yourself, then you can compare it for the organizations. Organizations have values, just like human beings do. Organizations have values of luminance. They have values of scope. They have all sorts of values. You can just really say, okay, I know that I'm aligned. I know my aptitudes are aligned here, but I think what's going on is that this company has a very high value of belonging. They want everybody to do everything together. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a low belonging person. Let me go find a place where I can do this work in an environment that more closely matches my values. So those would be my two.
Amazing. That's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing. So, wow, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I cannot wait to read your book, which is coming out on May the 5th. And I want to take all of the assessments. And I'm already like, I'm going to make my 16-year-old kid. Well, hold on. Is it appropriate for teenagers? Or do you think that they're okay?
Absolutely.
All right, kid, here we go.
It definitely is. It definitely is. So,
okay. Yeah. So tell us again where people can find more about your program, your process, your assessments, where they could get the book, if they want to keep hanging out with you. I mean, I feel like I could keep talking to you for hours. So if they want more Suzy Welch in their lives, how would one create this?
My website is a big hub of everything. I do have a podcast also, and you can find it. It's called Becoming You, and maybe someday you'll be a guest on. I would be very fortunate to have that happen. And so there's that. The book comes out. I think it might actually be May 6th. It's May 6th. Okay.
May 6th. Okay.
And that tool that I talked about, the Values Bridge, is out in about a week. It's still getting the final touches in beta, but you can find that on my website. I have another tool, which is out already, which you can find on my website. It's called Pi 360. It's a quick, fast, very inexpensive way to find out how the world experiences you. Allows you to do 360 feedback with up to 40 people.
Amazing.
So SuzyWelch.com is a good starting place. I have a newsletter. So thank you for letting me have these shameless plugs of myself. And I'd like to keep hanging out with them if they want to keep hanging out with me.
Yeah. Well, hey, not shameless plugs. Like, the world needs you. They need what you have to offer. So you just help them know where to get it. Well, Suzy, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for visiting with me today.
And what you do is so important. So I thank you for all the people who find you so essential to their lives. So thank you so much for having me on.